Okay, got it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, let me get this up here. Robert
So I
Swarwood
was
here. I am here with the best-selling author Wendy Walker. She is the author of the psychological suspense novels All Is Not Forgotten, and then the night before, Don't Look for Me, What Remains, an American Girl. Her novels have been translated into 23 foreign languages, topped bestseller lists both nationally and abroad, and have been optioned for both television and film. She holds degrees from Brown University and Georgetown Law, and we're not going to get into all that unless you want to. You want me to read all that too? But well, it does say here, as a former family law attorney with training in child advocacy, she draws from her knowledge of trauma and psychology to write compelling and complex characters and stories. And her most recent book is What Remains, which actually Wendy, did you know that it's on sale right now?
yes, I
The
did.
ebook. So
On
yeah, if
sale.
you're
You
looking
put
at
it
this
on
right now, I don't know how long it's going to last,
about
but
time.
buck
Yes,
99. You can get it on Kindle. I'm assuming on all ebook platforms, at least in the United States. So buck 99. That's a steal for this. I had to go
yes.
through my office. I'm sure I have other ones, but I also have Don't Look for Me here, which in the light, you can kind of see the rain coming. I'm actually listening to this right now. Therese Plummer does a really great job.
So
Um,
good. Yeah,
we had
she does
actually,
both points of view, which is really unusual, and she
I was
does a really
surprised that they had her doing both points of view. And we can talk a little bit more
yeah.
about that if we have time. And I
Oh,
also have this old paperback, I don't know, of All Not Forgotten.
that's an
Um,
that's an arc. That's actually the
this is an
hardcover.
arc?
Yeah, yeah, that's an arc. How'd you get an arc?
No,
It's
it's
an
not an
arc.
arc. I mean, it has
Oh,
printing
well,
stuff.
it's, that was the cover that was the hardcover. Um,
I mean, this is a 6 by 9 too. It's not like a
yeah,
regular,
that's
it's
so
weird.
odd. So, yeah, the
Hmm.
hardcover was that cover, and then there was a trade paperback and a mass market. So there have been 3 different US covers, and then
Nowhere on
many
here does it say it's an arc. I don't think it's an arc, but
okay,
anyway, it's really cool.
that's so
And it
odd.
says film rights sold to Warner
Oh,
Brothers,
so
sold to
that is that's so strange. How why is it a paperback?
I don't
Very
know. Honestly,
curious.
I think I've ended up seeing that at like a Books a Million in like the bargain space or
Oh, maybe
whatever.
so
So I
maybe they
grabbed
did it
it.
in maybe they did it in paperback with the same, cover for some of the big box stores.
Maybe. So all
Anyhow,
right, so let's get
yeah,
into it right
so
now.
please,
So
let's
people
get
know
into it.
you as Wendy Walker, suspense author, but that's not how it started, from what I can tell. Because if you go now, I don't think it's anywhere on your website, but if you go on Amazon,
Are you
there are a
talking
lot
about
of
like, the stepchildren I keep in the basement? My
yes. Let's talk about the naughty stepchildren that you want to
yes,
ignore.
I know.
Were the chicken noodle soup? No, wait. Is that how it is?
Chick
What is it?
chick that's how is this how it's gonna go, Robert? Okay.
Probably, yes. I told you it was very informal.
Chicken soup for the soul. All right, here
Chicken
so
soup for the soul.
all
Yeah.
right,
So
so
how
you're
did that?
from
So
the
okay,
beginning.
even before that though,
Yeah.
did you always want to do this? I mean, when you were in like, like some writers, like they knew in elementary school they wanted to be a writer. At what point did you realize, okay, this is something that not only do I want to try to do, but this is something that I can do?
No, I was much smarter when I was younger, and I had I wanted to do things like investment banking and being a lawyer. So and before that I wanted to be an Olympic figure skater, so that, was kind of a pipe dream. But yeah, so I had a lot of different aspirations before I started writing, and the truth is I started writing after I had my first son, and I had taken time off from corporate litigation because that is not a family friendly job. I think even today with all the resources, but back then we didn't even have the internet. So I know I'm dating myself, but there was no work from home as a lawyer. And so when I was home with my son and I just fell in love with him and with parenting, and I really wanted to be home. I knew we were planning, 2 or 3 kids for our family, and I wanted to be home with them until they were in school, but I didn't want to not work because I was actually going a little bit crazy in the sub. We had moved out of New York City. I was in the suburbs where I had grown up, where my family lived, actually the same suburb. And it was, and anyone who has children there's that moment where you're like, you're watching them play with blocks or something on the floor, and you've got your coffee, you're like mainlining your coffee, and you're like, oh, just put the green ball in the green hole, because that's the only one it fits in. Like, when are you gonna get this? And you're this is all you do all day is, and the child is learning, and this is what they need to do. They need to fail and fail and fail. And then, like, oh, the green ball goes in the green hole, like problem solving skills. And you need to let them do that. But when you've been in these, in a working environment, and you've been sort of on a treadmill of achievement your whole life, and then you stop, it's very easy to transfer your ambitions onto your child, and that is not good parenting, right? We all know. So I knew I had to find an outlet for my own thoughts and my own ambitions. And so I thought, like, what can I do from home? And back then, really, your choices were, make jewelry and go to trunk shows, or write novels. But the truth is, I have always loved storytelling, and so I think it was in me to want to write and want to tell stories, but it was not in my ether to ever think of doing that as a career. I grew up in sort of an American dream family where, my parents were the first ones who were born here, the first generation. And my grandparents, great grandparents were janitors, and my grandmother worked at the DMV for her entire life. Like, they were, nobody went to college. So that was sort of our family tradition, our family, just, it was in our blood, was to try to move forward and achieve more things than the generations before. So, thinking about being a writer, where you can never predict your success, your financial stability, was not something I had ever considered. But I think it must have been in me, because that's where I landed instead of making jewelry. So thank goodness I didn't try to make jewelry. And so, yes, so I started writing, and that was, gosh, it must have been about 24 years ago. So then the first book I wrote was actually a legal thriller, and it got me an agent, but it did not sell. And once I had an agent, I then, stepped on the gas a little bit. And what interested me then was suburban culture and all of the things that I had been experiencing in suburbia. So I wrote these two novels that both were published by St. Martin's. And they were, I guess people would call them women's fiction, though I don't really use that term. I just say, I guess they'd be upmarket fiction, maybe. And they were just about sort of housewives in suburbia, and the dynamics between husbands and wives, and the complete division of labor that happens out here, where women stay home and take care of all things domestic, and men work. That still is largely true, even though we have been through a couple of feminist movements, and Betty Friedan was out, uh, burning bras and telling women to go back to work. So, in spite of that, there's just something about the economic structure out here that makes that happen. So anyway, I wrote these two novels that were very much about that. They sold, but they didn't do well. But yes, they are out there. They're on Amazon. I think they're good. I actually like them a lot. They're very different. You might still hear my voice in them. But yeah, so there you go. And then, then Chicken Soup for the Soul. So then when those books didn't sell, I was then divorced. I hadn't practiced law for 14 years. So I thought, is there a way to make money as a writer where I can still be home with my kids? Because that was my goal, was to be able to be my children as much as I could. And so Chicken Soup for the Soul was purchased, company was purchased by a group of investors in a town next to mine. And so they found me and asked me if I wanted to edit a few of their books. So I ended up doing that. Yeah.
So that kind of just fell in your lap. It wasn't like you had pursued it. They just contacted you out of nowhere. That's pretty
And
amazing.
can you imagine how daunting too? Because I had 3 kids. I was in a single mom, and I was, you know, trying to juggle all that. And I had no idea what it would take to edit. And it's actually, I mean, that's a whole other, like, conversation to have, is what goes into that. And it was really fascinating. There's a database of millions of stories that people submit to Chicken Soup for the Soul, and I imagine other similar brands. And it was my job to go through them and try to find stories that fit into whatever chicken soup book I was writing or editing. So I did one that was originally called Power Moms, which I thought that title was not necessarily going to fly. It was eventually converted to stay-at-home moms, which was more appropriate. But it was about women who decided to take time off to from their careers to raise their kids. And so I got some celebrities in there. It was a pretty cohesive book. I have actually written now 5 essays for Chicken Soup for the Soul, because of the 3 books that I edited, and I contributed to 2 others. And then I did Thanks Mom and Thanks Dad, which again, I had to go into this database and pulling these stories. I mean, these stories were so, I mean, they were so good at even if they weren't well written, because writing fiction requires a lot of tools that most people don't have. I didn't have, even practicing law all those years. I didn't know how to write fiction. I had to learn. But the stories, right? So you'd see this content, and they were only, I think, 1,100 words. So I could go in and edit them and restructure them, and take the guts of the story and make them a little bit more readable, and formatted to fit in with the rest of the stories in the compilation. But it was fascinating to see all of these stories that people were submitting about their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it made me a better storyteller, because then you just see how people tell their stories, and you start honing your skills. How's a better way to tell this story? Like, how can I get to that punchline better, or how can I get another tear jerking moment a little bit harder, a few more tears. And so you start thinking about, what is the story really doing? What emotion is it eliciting, and how can I make it even bigger?
And so then you transfer, I don't want to say transfer over, but you make the jump to psychological suspense, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah.
So at that point, was it just, you mentioned before that the other books, it was was it Social Lives and Four Wives,
Yeah.
that I guess the sales weren't really there. And oftentimes I don't think really readers really kind of take into consideration that um, you know, a book could be great, readers could love it, but if sales aren't there, it doesn't matter. I mean, the publisher is gonna
It
will
matters.
drop you or with whatever else. So like it doesn't matter really how great a book is, how well it's received by a certain sect of writers
Yeah.
or readers, on unless it's like a huge swath, it doesn't really matter. So okay, so you make that switch. Then was it All Is Not Forgotten was the first one?
Yeah, so that was years later. So I think Social Lives came out in 2009, and All Is Not Forgotten was published in 2016. And in between that time, I went back to practicing law. And where I was able to find work was as a family law attorney, which is not where I had started. So I transitioned back by volunteering, actually, at legal services, and they needed help with family law. So I got trained in family law, and then I eventually found a job, and I worked like 2/3 time, which then really is full time. You just do it, sort of at home when your kids are in the bath and you're on your BlackBerry and taking calls and all of that. But it was, I was making it work, but I just felt like I had this little my foot in the door. I hadn't gone all the way through the door, but my foot was in the door because I had been published and I had an agent. And so I just felt like I needed to keep working on that, because I knew it was something that would that I really was wanting to do, and I also knew it would be a better lifestyle for my family. So I kept plugging away, and I actually wrote another, like, just book about a family and sort of upmarket fiction, and found a new agent, and I think it was a year to write it, and then another year revising it for like seven. I think on my computer I have like revision seven, like seven full revisions. And she's came back and said, I don't think we can sell this book. The market is soft. It's not edgy enough. It's not like, it's a little too dark to be uplifting. It's not funny. And so I don't really know how to pitch it. And I almost stopped writing then. I think that was in 2015 in like January. And then but I just thought that, I started to think about what you were saying about how there is a business side to writing. And when I actually teach a class, to aspiring writers, this is, what I try to bring home is that a lot of writers will say, just write what you feel, write what you love, find your voice. That is awesome. And you need to do that. But there is a business side to this. And I've gone head to head on with like editors and agents on panels about this, because they will always say like, you can't write to the market. You can't write to a trend. By the time it gets published, the trend will be over. The wave will be, crashed into the shore. And that was not my experience. What I ended up doing was going back to my agent and saying, I'm going to write one more book because I'm, a single mom, 3 kids, and all I do is work as a lawyer and take care of my kids. And then any bit of free time I write. So if I'm going to write and it's on spec, everything's on spec, then I want to at least know that I am writing for something you can sell. I've spent 2 years writing something that you're telling me there's no market for. And it was like, I finally heard it. There's no market for this book. It's a fine book, but there's no market for it. So I started to think about the business side of publishing. And I went back and asked her if I could write any book for you that you are dying to put on an editor's desk or email box now, I guess, what would it be? Like, I don't care what it is, anything. It could be anything, just a fiction book that you just want to have in your hands and put on an editor's desk, and it'll sell. And she said, The Next Gone Girl, The Next Girl on a Train, a psychological thriller. So I did research on those books. I went, went into them and pulled them apart and tried to figure out what it was about them that was different from a legal thriller or a political thriller or just a police procedural. What is different about this like genre that is going to be the sort of the bells and whistles that will get me read and get me an offer? And I sort of made my list. And then I took an idea that I'd been kicking around for a few years about memory science. And I had thought about writing it as a legal thriller. And I reconfigured it as a psychological thriller with like all the things. And this is what I tell writers. And this is what I will argue to the death with editors and agents, that story is a great story. It could have been told many different ways. It could have been a general fiction novel. It could have been a police procedural. It could have been a legal thriller. And I turned it into a psychological thriller. And that book, it was a watershed. I wrote it in the spring of 2015. I took a hiatus from my law job. And I had to get it done before the kids were out of school for the summer, because all hell breaks loose. All the parents out there know what I'm talking about. And it was like a watershed. 17 years after I started writing that book, we had offers from every publishing house. I had a movie deal before I even had the book deal. I had a major movie deal with Warner Brothers and Reese Witherspoon attached, and it didn't get made. So but that often happens. But still, it was, a watershed moment. I had foreign contracts pouring in, preemptive deals from foreign publishers. And I remember thinking like, really? That's like, I just had to ask that one question. That's what it was. That was the key. Like I was like, that was finally the right key to opening the door. So that was in 2015. And that was All Is Not Forgotten.
Yeah, no, that's
I
incredible. Had you
promise
not
my
asked
answers
that, you
will
would
not be as long to all of your questions, but
no, I mean, had you not asked that question, you'd be on your like 25th chicken soup book now, probably.
no, I would not be writing.
You
I'd be a full-time family lawyer and I would have given up writing. Yeah.
so but that's interesting that you say that, and I think that's always really important in terms of like a lot of like writers workshops. They always deal in the craft, which is important, no doubt, but there is always that business aspect that always seems to get ignored because they want to focus more on craft. And I think it's mostly because it's a honestly, publishing is it's not a fun business. It's not a nice business. It's not a optimistic business. So I think oftentimes when you're having these like writers workshops, they don't want to like necessarily like, bring the mood down right away, basically saying like, okay, you guys want to be writers, like why? Because it is an awful business. You're going to be frustrated, most of the time. You might say, you might write the greatest book ever, but oftentimes too, like it comes down to luck.
Yeah.
um you know getting the book in front of the right editors at the right time. I mean, the book that you had, All Is Not Forgotten, you know had it been maybe like 6 months later, maybe another writer would have written a very similar book, and then that would have gotten all the attention. And then when and then because oftentimes
Yeah.
you'll hear like, oh, this is very similar to something else that we're publishing, and we got so it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Look,
but it
yeah. And that book too, honestly, that book now, the subject matter, it was a sexual assault of a teenage girl. There was the narrator is a man. After the Me Too movement, I think that would have, I mean, I don't think I'm a feminist, and this is not at all an anti-feminist book or a misogynistic book at all. It's really, but my narrator is a misogynist. I wrote a really not a great, nice character who narrates the entire book. I don't know how that would have been received after Me Too, because it's just there's an increased sensitivity to anything that is perceived as sort of a sort of taking taking over the subject matter of something that is an experience by a girl, and then written and told through a man's eyes, even though I'm a woman writing through the man's eyes.
yeah.
So yeah, the timing of it was, the timing of everything is so important. And taste change and moods change, and yeah, and that's why I, when I come up with a story, I want to love the story, but I'm very cognizant of what's out there, how stories are being told, and what people are really enjoying, and if mood has changed. Think about like film and TV shows. I so often will go back to a movie that I thought was great when I was, my kids' age. And this has been happening like since my kids were born. Like, oh my gosh, you have to watch, 16 Candles. And then I put it on. I'm like, no, stop watching. This is so inappropriate. Or it's so slow, because what we're used to seeing now is so fast, and the visuals and even the dialogue, the writing, it's so different. It's so much more sophisticated, that watching, in our minds, like these things were great, but now our brains have been recalibrated by the advancement in all of these mediums. And I think that's true of books as well. So you have to stay current. You have to look at how stories are being told and received, and what people are loving, because that gives you an indication of how people have been calibrated, what they are, what they're used to, what's allowing their brains to open up and be stimulated by the way the story is being told, and then they can actually receive the story itself. So I think it's really important.
Right. Which I think also kind of oftentimes, I mean, especially if you want to be a writer, it's always good. You should always be reading. But
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of writers just will read in their genre, which
Mhm.
is good because that's what you write and that's assuming like what you have the passion for. But it's also good to read outside the genre to also see what else is going on. Like there are oftentimes books that I probably would not want to pick up just because it's not my type of book, but it's like a major successful book. And so I'm just curious, especially being in this space, trying to figure out why, like what was it about this book that really caught on, or like, what did this author do that maybe was different And then I think that goes to part of just like the research aspect. But all right, we're already at 6:30 and we have a lot more to talk about. So let's talk about okay, let's talk about the most recent book that came out, which is What Remains.
Yes.
Would you say that this is a little bit of a different book from the rest of your psychological thrillers?
All of my thrillers are really different. So yes and no. It's different from my other thrillers, yes, but no, it's not a departure at all from my work because they're all standalones. They are all very different. And this one is it's deeply psychological. I guess if I had to,
I guess it's, would you say this is probably the darkest one you've done?
oh no.
Well, I guess from one standpoint, I guess if we're looking at different
I
things.
mean, I think
Okay.
All's Not Forgotten is probably the darkest. It is All's Not Forgotten is the darkest book I've ever written. This
Right.
book is this book goes into the head of one narrator. So this is only the second book I've written that is in the head in first person of one character. And it does have a point of view, a second point of view that comes up every few chapters, and it's like a second storyline that's simmering, and they come together at the end. But the main story is told by Elise Sutton, and she is a cold case detective, and we are in her head after she kills one man to save the life of another in this shooting in a department store, and then it torments her, and then the man whose life she saved reconnects with her and then torments her, and she has to then get herself, and her family sort of extricated from this man's obsession. So it's got a stalker element to it. It has a lot of trauma. I mean, it's not a police procedural at all. She goes off the grid. She is not working through the department, through her, even with her partner. She is off the grid, using all of her skills and resources to try to outmaneuver this man who is obsessed with her and stalking her, and she doesn't even know to what end. So it's, in that sense, it's sort of terrifyingly dark. It's not as creepy as Don't Look for Me, for example. And it's not as sort of flat and psychologically not neutral, but like Emma in the Night is sort of that flat affectation of one of the characters that, there's something simmering. So it has that like creepy, like, like a porcelain doll kind of feel about it. Like,
Right.
okay, the doll looks okay, but we know it's not. So you are in Elise's head. She is raw, going through this trauma, reeling from it, being badass, trying to save her family from this man, and steeped with guilt about whether or not she had to take down this shooter to save this man's life, because she really can't remember the exact second that it happened. So yeah, it's got all of that stuff in it. So I don't know. I guess I don't really put my books on a darkness scale, because I guess they're all kind of dealing with the darker sides of humanity, but just different parts of it. You're like,
Right. So, well, the one that you had
no
written before
particularly.
this, the one you written before this. So between Don't Look for Me and What Remains, you had written a novel, which for some people are going to think like, well, what are you talking about? Because they're only really aware of like, a print ebook. Now you had an Audible original novel that came out, um, like, was it a year ago, 2 years ago at this point?
2 years ago. So
2 years ago.
December of 2021. Yeah.
So, okay. So that one's called American Girl. That one is going to be released, in a couple weeks, right? 2 weeks.
Yes, October 17th. So about, yeah, 4 weeks, a little under
Okay.
4 weeks. Yeah.
So, so that one is, I mean, I would say that one's not as dark as like What Remains, or
Yeah.
even like Don't Look for Me. So like it looked like that was, even though it was still a suspense novel, you were still, I don't want to say it was lighter either, but you know what I mean? It was just a different type of feel to it. At what point did you, I mean, do you just come up with a lot of different ideas, or like, how do you guys, I always had to say like, where do you get your ideas? But like, are there
Yeah.
just ideas where you come up and you're like, that's way too dark. Like, I'm just not going to write that, no reader wants to read that. Or, I mean, like what kind of inspired, and I guess tell us a little bit about like American Girl and just kind of like maybe what's the inspiration behind that one.
Yeah, so I mean, look, ideas when you are writing commercially, when you have to put out a book a year, a book every year and a half or so, you train yourself to start looking for things that catch your eye, catch your ear, things that are just that your brain finds interesting, and then you grab hold of them like, why? Wait, why? Why was that interesting? And if it's interesting to me, would it be interesting to someone else? And then what can I do with that, that reason for it being interesting? And so ideas, come from many, many different places, but they don't always work. I mean, I have a whole document on my computer with ideas. And sometimes they don't go anywhere. And then sometimes later you'll pull them into a plot and you'll sort of, weave them in. But this idea, yeah, this book, it was during the pandemic. And I actually came up with the idea the summer before, but I didn't know what really to do with it. And it was about this girl, a 17-year-old girl. She didn't, and in the book, she's autistic. She did not start out being autistic. She just started out being Charlie Hudson. So she was just who she was. The story is about this 17-year-old girl in an economically challenged town in the middle of Pennsylvania. And a wealthy business owner is found murdered. He is the owner of the sandwich shop where she works. And there's a surveillance tape that shows her hiding under the counter the night that he died. He's not found at the sandwich shop, but they think his body was moved. And she definitely saw or heard something. And so it's narrated by her, and you don't really know exactly what she saw or heard until sort of the end of the book. But she gets embroiled in the mystery of who killed this man, and all of the people in her life that she loves become suspects because so many people really hated this man, and he had done a lot of sort of nasty things to people. He was not a good guy. So when I was writing it, because it was her point of view, she had to convey to the reader all of the characteristics of the other characters. So you understood why they were suspects, what was motivating them to have this hatred for this man, Clay Cooper. And I started to think about why a 17-year-old girl would have that skill, because most teenagers do not have that degree of awareness and empathy for adults. They're very, and it's totally normal. It's, part of the brain development, but that stage of life is really about watching, their peers and figuring out how to survive in their peer group and being very self-interested. So I started to think about why this girl would have these skills, and I ended up making her neurodivergent because I could then give her these sort of innate challenges in reading social cues and in understanding people throughout her life that made her very aware of of her surroundings and of people, and actually taking notes on them and building like this rule book. She has all of these rules that she follows so that when she meets a person, she can apply her rules and try to figure out the social situation because it doesn't come to her naturally. And so by doing that, I was able to create a character who could really understand these adults around her and convey their personalities and their stories to the reader. So it ended up being this story about an autistic teenage girl who's embroiled in a small town murder, which is a lot lighter than my other books.
Right. So based on that, can I assume that you don't really outline the books, or do you just,
Oh no, I outlined
or
like
you do
crazy.
outline? So, okay.
Like,
So it wasn't like you
yeah,
just were writing and then realized, okay, this character, actually, there's more here. We need to,
yeah.
that was during the outline phase.
No, I wrote the book and I wrote the character. I actually wrote it during COVID. So the story came to me, in this bar in Pennsylvania. I was dancing to a cover band was playing American Girl by Tom Petty, which is why the title of the novel is American Girl. And I had this very visceral reaction hearing this song, being surrounded by women in all different stages of their lives. Like there was a pregnant bartender and these young girls in the corner, like flirting with these guys playing darts. And then these older moms my age, sitting, just chilling, watching the band, just and seeing the different trajectories of a woman's life. And then hearing a song that was, one of my favorite songs when I was that, coming of age. I had this visceral reaction to it. And I knew I needed to write this character. And then I built the plot for her. I got to the book during COVID, during lockdown. All of my sons were home. And I felt like I needed to control something in my life. And the one thing I could control was that I was still capable of writing. And so I just decided to write this story that had been burning a hole in my pocket for months. And so I outlined the plot, I outlined the mystery, and I wrote the whole thing in about a month. It was like a, fever dream kind of book. But then I went back and, then you always have to edit. And so I went back and I thought about how to massage it. And I started to ask myself this question about the main character and why she was the way she was. And I knew that was going to be, I knew I needed more backstory for her and I needed something more for her. And that's when I went back and wrote in the autism. And when we sold it to Audible, we used a sensitivity expert and of course, Paige Lyell, who is the performer of the book, who was really instrumental in making it authentic.
Yeah, no, she was a great narrator for the book.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess the outline, I mean, was it just kind of like you do like a page or two main thing that kind of changes as you're writing it? Because speaking of Audible originals, like
Uh,
we had sold one, which was initially a novella and it was a very detailed outline, which I hate outlining for,
that's
first of all,
Serafina?
and no, it was a follow-up. It will probably come out next year.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully. I don't know. It's delayed. I don't know what they're really doing over there, but we sold it as like a 30,000 word novella. But then when I actually started writing it, I realized, well, to make this work, I'm going to need to add in a lot more stuff. And it became more like, I think almost 60,000 words. So
Wow.
like, that was one of those things that even having done I mean, it still followed, the outline. So like, do you find that too, where, I mean, I don't know, like how, cause I know like, like a Jeffrey Deaver will like spend a month working on like an outline that's very, very, compact and everything. Like, is it like a loose outline or like, that like changes as you're writing it, or does it you usually
It's
stay
yeah,
the same?
it's chapter by chapter and it's really just the plot points. So I don't outline everything that's going to happen in the chapter, but chapters tend to be a scene, like one scene. And so I will have I know the disclosures for the plot, for the mystery part of the plot. And some of those disclosures will be character driven, like this character finds out about that character, or the reader gets to find out that this character killed somebody, or the whatever. So some of them are character driven, but they're pieces of information that the reader needs to know by the end of the story to put everything together. And in my mind, those have to come in a certain order in order so that they will be so you don't tip your hand, so you can give some red herrings and you can build suspense, but also so that at the end it's all cohesive and that the clues build on each other and they make sense. So for me, I need to have that blueprint of the disclosures. And some I actually call my plot outline like list of disclosures. And I just put them in order and I allocate them to chapters. And then the rest of the chapter, I then, I'll sit down and look at the day's work and think, okay, today the reader needs to find out the following information. What is a good setting for that to happen? Should I have two characters together? Should I have one character, experiencing something and having some thoughts and some, internal thoughts about backstory, some little flashbacks? So I try to figure out the best vehicle for that chapter to give that information. And then the rest of it is filling in with, the setting and the character and adding all of that stuff. And that happens in the moment while I'm writing. But yeah, I have to have the blueprint. So with American Girl, I actually ended up changing it when we sold it to Audible and they went into edit. I changed the ending, and then I had to thread through, all of the seeds of that, and a lot of changes get made. But the basic blueprint is what allows me to get to the end of a first draft.
Right. And so speaking of Audible, for anybody who has listened to the audiobook, which I guess if you're an Audible member, you can still download it for free, correct? I don't know if they had
I think
changed
it's
it or
credit.
not.
I think it's one
Now
credit.
is it a credit? Well,
It has
anyway, if you have a
been a
chance to
credit.
listen to it, it's primarily a narrator doing
Yeah.
most of the story, but there are, I think, at least, was it 2 or 3 sections, if I remember correctly? It's been a while now. That
There's
is
six.
kind of like a full cast. It like has like sound effects in the back, has, more than just the narrator. And I remember you and I had spoken before about this. That was something that like you didn't write it that way. Audible wanted
No,
to make it a little bit more immersive. So I'm assuming for the print and ebook editions, we're back to the regular prose
yeah.
for those
Yeah.
chapters. So how then for the Audible edition did you, like, was it more like Audible was like, hey, maybe this chapter you do this, or like, like I don't know, like what was that experience like then having to basically take a chapter and kind of adapt it for, which is essentially like a radio
Radio
drama
play.
play almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it when they asked me to do that, they had been, starting to do more and more of these, they're calling them audio plays. And sure, I was, we went through, we picked out 6 chapters that would lend themselves to that kind of format, and it was a learning curve. It was all dialogue and sound effects, and they had to send me some samples to figure out how to write these sound effects. I had written a couple of screenplays, nothing that got made, but I didn't think, I think they were okay, so I knew how to do that. But it's very different when you don't have any action. So you're writing for just sound, dialogue, and sound effects. So you can't, no one's going to see these characters. So you can't write in a kiss, you can't write in a hug, you can't write in a look, you can't, all these action pieces that we see in a film or television show, you don't have that tool. So, and you don't have narration. So it was really great. It was fun. And I ended up, another thing coming out in 2024 will be a fully scripted 5 to 6 hour audio play on Audible called Mad Love. And so Audible, I ended up doing this other piece for them that's completely scripted. So I guess I figured out how to do it enough that they wanted me to do more.
Is there anything else you can tell us about Mad Love, or is it still kind of like,
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
or is like under wraps, or like what
No,
can
it's
you tell
done.
us
It's
about
in
it?
the can. I love this story. So, Mad Love is sort of Dirty John meets the Tinder swindler meets, the psychological thriller. So it's about a younger man who is married to a 47-year-old widow who has um, twin 18-year-olds, and she and this young man, Adam Archer, her husband, are found shot in their bed in a suburban town in Connecticut. And she has survived, but she's in a coma. And her son is missing. There was a gun found, but then it was gone. And the daughter was at the crime scene. So there are all of these suspects, and 2 cops are trying to figure out, who shot this couple. And it's got a lot of twists and turns. It has a huge twist that I came up with in the 11th hour and wrote in, and it was a lot of fun. So hopefully that will get produced this year. It's completely finished, and now they just have to. I know the strike is impacting a lot of the production, because they are actors that they hire to do these, not audio performers. So um, but I'm hoping it will get done in 2024. It's called Mad Love, and it's I wouldn't say it's lighter, but it's sexier than most of my books. It's actually, there's a lot of it's about seduction and all that good stuff. Mad Love, that's the title. So
All right,
yeah,
very cool.
love that drives you mad.
And then I'm assuming, are you working on anything else that will be out in the more, I guess I want to say book world, but you know what I mean? Like, do you have another
Yeah,
novel that's been, or like it's a little bit too soon to talk about anything?
a little too soon, but I am always working, and yeah, and I'm got one thing finished, and I've got something else that I'm working on right now. And going back to what we were saying at the beginning about telling the story. So yeah, I have this book, and I've been sort of trying to find the right way to tell it, and um, I'm about a third of the way through, and yeah, kind of really loving it. So, and editing something that was finished, and I'm working on edits for that. So I've always got some things going on depending on what I'm kind of uh, um, not in the mood for, but I always have a couple of things going on. So yeah, edits, and then also trying to develop a new novel.
So again, the most recent book is What Remains. Again, ebook wise, it's currently a buck 99, at least in the United States. So definitely grab a copy of that. And then American Girl is available right now in audio, but it will be
And
out
you can
in,
purchase it. You can purchase it. You don't have to be a subscriber to Audible.
right,
Subscribers can get it for 1 credit, but you can also just purchase it as an
right.
audio from Audible.
And it will be out. Blackstone Publishing is putting it out in, is it hardcover and paperback? Or are they doing the simultaneous release for that?
Simultaneous release. Yep. So any
And that,
format you want, it will be available.
and
Oh
that
yeah.
had recently a starred review from Publishers Weekly, which was a
And
fantastic.
yeah, and book list as well. So we've had 2 starred trade reviews, and it's a very character driven story. It's one of the last chapter of American Girl is my most favorite chapter that I've ever written. I think it's my most favorite anything that I've ever written. I actually wrote part of that ending first, and then wrote the rest of the book, just dying to get to that ending and finish it.
Can we talk about, and you can tell me, say, and you can say no, but when we talked earlier about
Yeah.
just, with publishing, no one really knows anything. Like you said, this was one that you had written a while ago. And at the time you couldn't really find anybody who was interested in doing it. And then,
Yeah, it
it
was,
became a
yeah,
huge hit with Audible and now has, like 2 starred reviews from 2 trade reviews. You know what I mean? Like it
yeah.
seemed like there was definitely something there, but for whatever reason at the time, and it wasn't even
Well,
that long ago. It just, no one was
no.
really into it.
Well, it was really just, my people. So we didn't go out with it because there was a feeling that it was too young, and that it was too light and too young for my brand. And I let that get in my head. I wish now that I had, although it's had a wonderful journey. I don't know that it would be the same book if Paige Lyell had not been brought in to narrate it, and it went through that transformation at Audible with brilliant editing. So that wouldn't have happened if we had sold it, for print originally. But that said, I absolutely love this book, and I think it was viable. And so, yeah, I wish I had been more of an advocate for my work, but that's, of course, where nobody knows. And it was the pandemic. So everyone, it's easy to be Monday morning quarterback. What is it? Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yeah, that sounds about
Um,
right.
yeah. But uh yes, but I loved this story, and I believed it. And that was one time where I felt like, okay, I don't think I'm a crazy artist who just like loves this thing and it's not good. I think it's good. Like, I think I love it, and I think it's good. And but still a business, so you have to convince other people of that too. But
Right.
anyway, it's all's well that ends well. It's coming to print on October 17th.
October 17th, you'll be able to
Yeah.
find in bookstores. You can pre-order it. Pre-orders are always very helpful. So pre-order if you can, maybe even pre-order from your local indie. If you don't have the money, maybe ask for your local library to order a
Yes.
copy. And that's always
Yes.
helpful too.
Yeah.
So are you reading anything good recently? Seeing anything good on TV? Any good movies that you could recommend?
Oh my gosh, I'm reading a bunch of books that are not going to be out for a while. So I can't recommend any reading right now, but well, my good friend Jean Kwok is coming out with A Leftover Woman on October 10th. And I read that a while ago and it's really, really great. So look out for that. I just finished watching The Bear. I people kept telling me to watch it. And season 2, the Christmas episode, I'm just gonna say, like, anyone who wants to know me, like, that episode was like candy for my brain. I mean, it's so dark, but it was so, so good. And it was so genuine and psychologically accurate, which I crave, is psychological accuracy on dysfunctional families. It was just brilliant. I love that show. I really hope it comes back. And now I'm having a little palate cleanser with Ted Lasso, which I'm also loving. It's also
Yeah.
really good show. So yeah.
I don't know if you would agree with
How about
this.
you? What are you watching and reading?
Well, so The Bear, I always want to talk about season 2 because I think season 1 and see TV, and usually this happens with TVs. I mean, obviously movies maybe, but sometimes I feel like certain TV shows become so successful that then everybody wants to be in it. So like in season 2, like you mentioned, the Christmas episode, it was just like one cameo after another of these major stars. It almost became like a distraction. You know what I mean? It kind of like distracted a little
Oh,
bit from the
I
book,
loved
where it
it.
was like, and I think the same thing too with like, what was it? The most recent season of Only Murders in the Building. I mean, you have like Meryl Streep in there with Paul Rudd, and it's just like all these like major, and it almost becomes a little I mean, they're great actors, and it's not like I think it hinders the performance, but sometimes it just kind of feels like you kind of take out the viewer because it's like all these people, like the Christmas episode was like John Mulaney and they had all these other people. And it's just like,
Yeah,
just like,
for me though, the acting, those actors, they are phenomenal character actors. And so I got lost in the characters and I just so appreciated their craft and their talent in portraying these characters that we were dying to know about, for all the episodes before. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. But I agree. Sometimes the shows can get hyped and then you get, they can jump the shark, which a lot of people don't know that expression. I've had to explain it to my kids and but yes.
yeah, you would think by now there would be more of an updated version of that.
But
I
it's
don't know
come
what
on,
you
it's
would
just so
call
good.
it.
And it's on
It is
YouTube,
good.
actually. Anyone who doesn't know what jump the shark means, just like
Yes, yes. Go on YouTube and
get
look
up
for
on
it on YouTube.
YouTube and then see like Fonzie in a leather jacket and water skis. And it's just
So I
amazing.
don't know about you. I often try to read a lot of different books at the same time, like listening to audio. I'm actually listening to Don't Look for Me right now. Usually
Okay.
I'm reading a book on Kindle. I usually try to
Yeah.
read some type of like short story collection and then also another like hardcover paperback. I'm reading this. I don't know if you read about it's, Joyce Carol Oates,
Okay.
48 Clues into the Disappearance of My Sister. Very interesting book. And then also this The Secret Lives of Church Ladies.
Oh.
I
Oh, okay.
Philia. She just actually had a big book deal that was announced, but that's a short story collection. But we are at almost 7 o'clock. So Wendy Walker,
Yes.
thank you so much for hanging out. Everyone go check out Wendy's books. WendyWalkerBooks.com is where they can find
Yes.
you.
WendyWalkerBooks.com. Yep. And my
So
website has
excellent.
all the information. So yes, check it out. Thanks everybody. And thank you for having me. It's so great to catch up with you.
Absolutely. So hopefully we'll have you back some other time once
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
another couple books out, because you seem to be just like, you know, a machine right now with all these
Well,
books. So,
catching up for lost time. So
so
yes.
all right, everybody,
All
have a
good.
great night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you